Hey, everybody. Man, I've got my friend Adam Hill with me today, and I've gotten to know him recently. And I have to tell you, today's conversation is going to be a special one for you today. You're going to love it. Adam is, just to give you a bit of context, he's an international keynote speaker. He's a best-selling author. His book, Shifting Gears from Anxiety and Addiction to World Championship Triathlete, is just incredible. And man, yeah, I know you're running a big business. You got a big company you're running too. You've got your own podcast you're doing, and you're really helping people, as the name of your show is, but flow over fear, but helping overcome a lot of that so they can become who they want to be. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
I'm excited, Ben. Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, it was great to have you on my show previously, and we chatted a little there. And so, yeah, I've been grateful to get to know you recently.
Thank you, man. I feel the exact same way. I'd like to jump in because, as your book title says, from anxiety and addiction. And I know that, this is a subject that, a lot of people don't talk about.
Right.
But I also know it's something that millions, probably billions of people are struggling with in some way, shape, or form, whether that it is from the anxiety standpoint, whether it is some form of addiction. So why don't we jump in? Maybe tell us a bit of your, if you don't mind, maybe share a bit of your turning point through some of that, if you will. And then I want to get into some things that have helped you through that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're absolutely right when you say the big B word. Billions of people, I believe, struggle with anxiety or fear in some way on a daily basis. I mean, pre-COVID and all of that, mess of what messed with everybody's mental health. We had 20% of the United States population reported experiencing anxiety.
Pre-COVID.
And yeah, so I mean, like you think about how that's been affected since then.
For
You
sure.
can only imagine it's gotten a lot bigger.
For sure.
And yeah, so for me, growing up, I grew up as somewhat of a worrier. As a child, I was always worrying about stuff, but I didn't think anything of it because it wasn't part of the conversation. And back in the 80s and 90s, we were more inclined to talk about DARE and keeping kids off drugs than mental health.
Sure.
And so we didn't talk about mental health. And occasionally you would hear about kids in high school who might have gone away for a while, like because they went a little crazy or something like that. And those were kind of the outliers, but we never talked about it. And so the worry that I had was just internalized, and, people who are adults or teachers would always just say, yeah, don't be such a worry wart and things like that. But I noticed that growing up, it did affect my ability to form relationships. It affect my ability to form friends. I was introverted, and I was afraid to talk to girls, and ask them out because of the fear of rejection and all of those things. And it was really when I went to college that it started to escalate quite a bit. I had my first experiences with alcohol, as many college kids do.
For sure. Yeah.
And that first experience with alcohol that I had was probably that experience that showed me that I had a problem with anxiety, because it immediately took it away. And I realized at that moment what life was like without anxiety. And I was like, oh my gosh, everything's more beautiful. Things are funnier. And I can talk to people. This is amazing. And so that kind of led me down the path of using alcohol to kind of lubricate my social, my social life. And so in that process, gradually the alcohol abuse became worse, and my anxiety during times of sobriety got worse, to the point where a few years later, I started suffering severe panic attacks that I didn't know where they came from. I didn't know what they were. And again, because we didn't really talk about mental health, I thought I was crazy. I thought I was alone. And, I would just find these random things would just attach themselves to my brain that I had to be super afraid of. I would panic to the extent where I couldn't breathe. I'd fall on the floor crying and all this kind of stuff in the midst of my room. I missed classes, and I was just struggling more, and alcohol continued to be that crutch that would lift my fears away.
Wow.
And ultimately alcohol became more problematic. So I began experiencing more problems. It was less fun. Yeah. And then over about a decade of alcohol abuse, it finally came to a head when I was 32 years old. And I started breaking the last rule that I said that I would never break, which was drinking and driving. Okay. and I got behind the wheel while I was in a blackout. So,
Yeah.
which means I don't even remember getting behind the wheel.
Yeah.
I got into a DUI accident, and fortunately nobody was hurt or injured, but I was inches away from, not being a free man anymore,
Wow.
And that was the point in my life sitting in the jail cell that really shifted my perspective from I'm, just trying to fight against this fear and battle it and suppress it down and try and manage this anxiety by brute force and alcohol to I either need help or I'm no good to anybody and I don't have a place on this planet. So that's what led me into recovery and Alcoholics Anonymous for me, which was what worked for me. And that started my journey of healing. And so I'll kind of pause there and see if there's any direction we can go.
So that was 32.
32. Yes.
32. Okay. Wow. Just as you bring that up, I was reading, what was it? Some of David Hawkins' work. You ever read David Hawkins' work?
No, I haven't.
He's he passed away probably a decade ago, but he was a great spiritual teacher. And anyways, he was good friends with the founder of AA. So I'm curious because as I read the book, I understood that a big component of Alcoholics Anonymous is surrendering to a higher power in some way, shape, or form. Would you have considered yourself spiritual, religious at that point? Prior to that, did it have an impact in your life? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I was. In fact, when I was in the jail cell, I was having a lot of conversations with God, and I think there's a difference between being a faithful person, someone who has a faith in a higher power, and one who practices a spiritual practice. And I would by no means practiced any kind of spiritual practice before that. But I had a faith in a God, in a higher power, that there was someone that was looking out for us, and it just wasn't reconciled with my behavior and my attitude towards it, because I didn't have the willingness until that point where I was in jail. And then going through Alcoholics Anonymous, which Bill Wilson, was the founder, kind of founded it on the spiritual principles of finding a higher power, and that higher power would bring you to sanity. And a lot of people, when they come into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, are turned off by that idea, because they're at their most broken, right. and they don't want to believe that a God could let something like that happen. But, I think one of the things for me in those early days of recoveries that I was kind of reconciling was God's will for us and my will that I was practicing, and what I was doing and what I was trying to force in my life that wasn't working, instead of that surrender, that letting go, which I feel like means not fighting the fear anymore, but really just letting go, standing up and facing the fear and saying, I see you, you're there. The anxiety, I live with you. And let's, while you're wildly uncomfortable, let's understand that we're going to live together, and let's build a relationship, because I want to understand what you're telling me. And I want to understand, and I want you to understand where, how I feel like I need to experience this life, how God is trying to lead it for me. So that's kind of the nature of how I looked at the healing process, was standing up and facing fear, which is that first evolution of that relationship with fear.
Yeah, I think that, when you think about addiction in any way, shape, or form, I mean, whether it's alcohol, whether it's food, whether it's Netflix, today I think just even something as simple as TikTok or Instagram could be you've got some kind of negative emotion that you don't like, a feeling of anxiety, a feeling of fear, a feeling of, any kind of low level emotion. And what you're talking about, to face that, it takes a lot of courage, because it doesn't feel good. It hurts, but it's so much easier for us to just bury myself in my phone. It's so much easier to crush the bag of chips, to, have a few beers, to do whatever. And as your story well describes, I mean, hey, well, as long as I was, you probably having a few drinks here, that feeling's gone, but then got worse and got worse and got worse. So I have my own kind of views on why I think that does happen, but maybe could you describe a little bit of, if we're not facing this stuff, if we're not addressing, if we're not beginning the healing, why do things typically get worse?
Yeah, because I think that in fighting fear, which is kind of how I would define that aspect of using whatever addictions it is to suppress it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, my weapon of choice was alcohol. I mean, that weapon of choice, as you said, could be anything. It could be that bag of potato chips. It could be the cell phone, or any kind of addiction, pornography, or whatever it may be for people.
Yeah.
It's really a way to put this veil over that fear and just push it down and say, yep, it's not there anymore. I know that it's not there anymore because this other thing here is giving me a dopamine hit or some other hit that I need to tell me that everything is okay. It's like a brief, warm hug that stabs you in the back as you continue to progress through it. Yeah. But I think it's that suppression of fear that makes it worse, because fear and anxiety or those kinds of things for most people, and I won't say all people, because there's degrees of these issues, and I think a lot of them require that help, that healing, but that fear is really signaling something. It's telling you, hey, there's either danger or there's something in your life that needs to change, or something that you need to address, but this is why you're feeling that anxiety. And standing up and actually saying, okay, so you're telling me there's this feeling and this is wildly uncomfortable. Let me lean into it and find out what it's telling me. And you have to do that through healing. You have to lean into the discomfort, because that otherwise, if you're suppressing it, it's just going to grow and expand and say, nope, I'm still here. I'm still going to be a part of your world. So that has to happen. And I think great ways to do that, for me, it started with Alcoholics Anonymous, but it also included therapy with another human being that was, a professional therapist that could talk with me. I'm still seeing the same therapist that I've seen for almost 15 years now. Or it could be some other community, but it requires that support that you need to stand up and heal from it. Otherwise, it will continue to dominate your life.
Yeah. And it seems like to me, I'm analyzing my own life and my own emotional struggles at times. And it seems like if we're feeling that fear, we're feeling that anxiety, which, as you said, 20% of people pre-pandemic, but those are just the people that said they were, I mean, that's not
right. Yeah, right.
I mean, it's probably, I think it's freaking everybody at some, at different times in our life. And some people, of course, it's way more intense than others. But when I have that tendency to just try and hide it in a way, or, maybe even just change what I'm doing in a way rather than embracing it. Matter of fact, a book that really helped me. I don't know if you ever read, it's up here, The Everyday Hero Manifesto by Robin Sharma. You read it?
No, but I'm expanding my library now. So
cool. You'll love it. He's great. But it's all small chapters. But this one chapter. So he's, big time coaches, billionaires, top people in the world. He said, everybody that comes on, they have to work with a therapist. Like part of the coaching agreement is that you're also going to work with a therapist. And anyways, he talked about this strategy where you would, rather than when this negative emotion comes up, you're thinking about something or it just shows up, rather than try and run away from it, rather than that, but to actually sit with it, to face it, as you say, and to feel it and use a similar approach. Like, what is it trying to tell me? What are you trying to tell me? And that takes courage. That takes, it's not necessarily fun when you're doing that,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's definitely not fun, but it is such an important part of it because I believe you mentioned the point of embracing fear. And part of my philosophy on how we build our relationship with fear is that it's an evolution, that it starts with, you're fighting fear, you're in the midst of your addictions, your traumas, whatever they may be, and you're doing everything you can to suppress it down, push it down, trying to show that it's not there, whatever. And then you face it, which is that healing part. And it's there in that phase. I believe that, part of that healing is standing up, facing it, knowing it, and then naming it. You name the fears that you have. And for me, I recognize that, I mean, my sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous literally put down a piece of paper in front of me that had the big words fears on it. Mm-hmm. And this was part of the 4th step inventory where I had to write out all of my fears, big or small, and just kind of talk about them. And so I wrote them all out. I named all of them, and I went through that process, that really uncomfortable process, from the fear of spiders to the fear of nuclear annihilation to all of this, stuff in between. And I noticed that, yes, a lot of the fears were irrational. Okay. So, right. I mean, like fear of nuclear annihilation, that's pretty much all of us. Or fear of spiders. It's like, okay, well, that's just a phobia of spiders. But most of those 200 fears that I named, they had nothing to do necessarily with danger.
Right.
They had, but if I looked at them, they really represented 3 specific types of fears, which are my uncertainty. So uncertainty about the future, which is where anxiety lives.
Okay.
Overwhelm.
Say
yeah.
again.
Go ahead. Yes. So that first one that I would feel was uncertainty. So that's one way fear would show up in my life. It's like, okay, I'm afraid of what I don't know, what's going to happen in the future, or I have this dream or desire, but I don't know what it looks like, or I don't know how to get there. Right. And then the second one was overwhelm. Like just life was piling on top of me and putting too much on me. And that's where panic attacks would happen for me. And then the third way it showed up was self-doubt. Like I would just look at, I had a desire and I just didn't believe in myself enough to want to pursue it. And those were really 3 of the ways out of all of those 200 that if I categorized them under those 3, I could typically categorize them into those 3 things. When I look more, go ahead.
Yeah. And you're saying, I just really want to hammer this home. You're saying the uncertainty, the unknown of the future, that is where anxiety lives. So you've got one level of fear, anxiety, because I don't know, there's the uncertainty. Part 2, you've got overwhelm, so many things that are on my plate, so many things to do. I don't even know where to go. Don't even know what to do. Don't even know what to start. And then the third one more time, the third one.
Yeah. The third one was self-doubt. So I felt like I just doubted myself, and it made me feel terrible, or it made me feel shame. And for me, shame was an emotion that I constantly tried to run from. That was the emotion I didn't want to feel. And, so self-doubt was a big one. And so I categorized these all into specific, things. And the next step, which is, talking about the embracing fear part, that would take years for me to kind of reconcile. Okay, well, that makes sense. But I didn't realize it at the time as I named these, because naming them was simply the act of healing, of saying, all right, I see you. I'm going to build a relationship with it. And
did you notice a shift when you started that? Could you feel different as you began to name them, or was it progressive?
Yeah, I would say that it was an immediate shift for me.
Really?
Just the fact of working with another human being on this, naming those fears and saying, this is what I'm feeling. This is what makes me afraid, and having that level of vulnerability, and having someone else there, whether it be a therapist or a sponsor or what have you, that says, that's, I validate you on your feeling of that. I mean, it was an immediate lifting of that. And that's where I think from the standpoint of healing through recovery from Alcoholics Anonymous and things like that, they talk about this spiritual awakening, or the desire to drink is lifted from you. And that's where it was kind of lifted. And I felt that immediately. And it was that was the spiritual experience, was just saying, okay, wow, I'm human. I'm allowed to feel these things. It's okay that I feel these things. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you know what? This is part of that human experience. And part of that human experience is a spiritual experience. And that spiritual experience comes from connection with other people within, those kind of communities, whether it be Alcoholics Anonymous or, Narcotics Anonymous or a mastermind community that you might be part of to lift you up. But it's in those trusted communities that those kind of things happen. That's why, I don't want to get too spiritual necessarily, but that's why it said where the 2 or more of us are gathered, that, there he is in the presence. So
that's beautiful, man. So would you say, even whether someone feels they may not be struggling with addiction per se, but anxiety is overwhelmed as a part of their life, self-doubt, which again, who on the planet doesn't deal with these at different times?
Right.
That exercise of just even listing all your fears, do you believe that can help in any of those? Is it more specific to anxiety?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it can help with any of those things if you name it first,
Hmm.
and that's an important activity just because our, especially when we experience anxiety or fear, our brains are really disorganized in how we experience it, because we're going to feel that overwhelm and we're going to want to react. We're going to say, oh my gosh, this is going wrong in my life. Everything is going wrong in my life. Everything's blah, blah, blah. And it's just this disorganized mess of things going through your mind. So by writing it down and just saying,
Yeah.
I'm afraid of this, or
Right.
this is what I'm feeling, and all of that,
Yeah.
it organizes it. And then you get to see it, and you could say, okay, I'm not acknowledging that. It's okay that I feel this. It's not going to kill me. This is just a feeling, and it's just a signal for something.
Yeah.
And the better part about it is, I want to make sure this point is driven home, that doing it with another trusted person, whether it be a therapist or somebody that can validate it, that can talk you through it, is probably one of the most valuable things that you can do with that piece of information.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, it's so good. I think I'm a big fan of journaling. I have been for years, and the power of, especially when we're kind of we're feeling a little messed up in there. It's like you say, it's overwhelming, or I've got a million things, and I'm, that tightness that comes in the chest of not knowing what to do next or whatever. But to actually take the concerns, to take the worries, or to take all the things you think you have to do out of your head onto paper, or as you're saying, to name the self-doubt, the doubt of whether I can actually do this thing, but to remove it from our head. Because it's so easy to just get stuck in there, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
And you can spend hours, days, weeks, months just living, way too much in your head.
Yeah.
And obviously, our mind's great for a lot of things, but man, it can be a trap at times.
Yeah. Oh, it really can. And it doesn't go away. I don't want to give the impression that the feelings, the insecurities, the anxieties, and all that goes away when you list these things out.
Right.
That it's just, oh, it's all gone, and I'm the most courageous person in the world. Let's go skydiving.
Yeah.
No, I still experience it on a daily basis. I wake up with it, but I now have the tools to kind of work with it. I woke up, I have a morning routine, and I can experience it in a different way now, where yes, it's still uncomfortable to experience fear, to experience anxiety, but I can look at that as an opportunity. Like I can look at those experiences of uncertainty, overwhelm, or self-doubt as opportunities. And that's kind of where we get into that next evolution, which goes into embracing it, because we can look at that fear and say, okay, what are you telling me? What are you signaling to me? Because if you're not signaling danger, if there's not a bear directly in front of me and I'm not immediately in danger, I have an opportunity to grow, because this is a signal that I'm just pushing up against the edge of my comfort zone. And if that's the case, there's something beyond that maybe can help me grow. So now we're looking at it as an opportunity. And that's where that discomfort that we feel, if we can breathe through it, work through it, we can find out where it wants to take us.
It's good, man. It's, sometimes I think too, if we've been living this way for a while, well, I don't think this, I know this, but we just become conditioned to the mind of fear, conditioned to the mind of anxiety. I had yesterday, I think it was 2 days ago, maybe, I was coming home from the gym, and I had a client of one of my agents call me that, I just know he's a bit of a handful, this guy. Right. And so I saw the call coming in. I didn't take it. I was driving. And then something else happened. I started thinking about, something I had to do later that day that I really, wasn't excited about doing. And Adam, I could just feel it. It's tensing up. I'm starting to go into, there's kind of like fear of it. I don't know. I wouldn't call it full on anxiety of it, but definitely a fear of it. And I caught myself, and I have to share, this has not been a super normal practice of me. So what you're sharing is so timely. But I had caught myself where I thought, okay, hold on a minute. What is it that I'm resisting here? What is it that I'm actually feeling? Why am I feeling this way? Is there any, real problem here? And I realized now it's just a reaction. It was a reaction to this moment, and whatever. I don't even know why the guy's calling,
Yeah.
And I had this other meeting that the feeling was, I don't want to do this. And I just asked, okay, well, I don't want to, why don't I want to do that? What is it that I had, this whole story about it, and began to think about it in a different way. So for everybody listening and watching, I'm just saying, I'd love to say I do this on the daily, but I just had this experience. It was either yesterday or 2 days ago. So it's so timely we're talking about this. Yeah.
That's so true. And when that happens, I mean, you find that your brain just like starts making up those stories. I love like that you experience that where you're just getting a phone call. You don't know what it's about necessarily, but you're already making up the story in your mind.
For sure.
Yeah. It totally. And that's just one of those ways where like separating your brain, like what your brain is telling you from the actual feeling, that's an important aspect, because our brains will lie to us about everything, or they'll exaggerate. And that's where our interpretation of the anxieties come from. So this is where, one of the tools to kind of deal with that is curiosity. I mean, like exactly what you did there, I think is great, because you asked the question about it. Like, and one of the best questions there is for that is like is that true question that, I heard that on many, many podcasts, like, that I listen to, but it's really powerful, is just looking at what your brain is telling you, and just kind of the new weapon for it is that true? Dig in and like really kind of question it, get curious about it. And that takes us away from attaching the emotion to what our brain is saying. And then we can just kind of start to learn a little bit more and respond better than reacting in the moment.
Yeah, that true question is a powerful one.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. I want to stay on the same, but switch gears a little bit. You guys, you're CEO of a large company. I mean, you guys have built a massive multi-generational family. You guys are, I believe I think it's over 9 figures now.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just reached 9 figures last year. Yep.
Congrats, man. I mean, that's massive. So how does, there's your day-to-day life, which we're really talking about, could be applied in any way, shape, or form. How do you run in that big of an organization? How do you bring some of this into your leadership? How do you bring some of this into, I guess, as running as big a company as you are?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it took a lot of education and re-education on my side. And I'm still learning a lot, because, there's not a lot of companies that have that are 4th generation businesses. There's not a cohort of companies you can just kind of tap into and say, hey, these are some of the issues. So there's a lot of working through a lot of those on their own. But the way I'm looking at organizations now is the same way I kind of look at our existence. Is they kind of behave in the same way. There's fears that exist in organizations, and how we manage those fears. So a lot of the ways is really, they really overlap as far as how we deal with our internal fears. Like, how do we do that? Well, we communicate, we name the things that are problematic. We try to operate with honesty, and we try to remove what our brains are telling us, from the emotion, from what the best course of action for the business is. And so it's never perfect. And I mean, there's still a lot of conflict that happens, but it's natural. And for us, I recognized, as kind of coming into this, that, we need help, and a lot of, as we do with our, in our personal lives, one of the keys to continuing to grow is to continue to transform and reshape how we operate. We have to change with the world that we live in. We have to transform if we want to grow. We have to let go of the things that don't work for us and lean into the things that do.
That's tough sometimes.
It is. Yeah. Especially within an organization that is
for sure
100 years old, stuck in their ways.
Yeah.
But, the one thing that really helped with us over the last couple of years was implementing EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And Gino Wickman wrote the book Traction, if you've ever heard of that. And and that was kind of the way that EOS started. Tens of thousands of companies are now running on that operating system, and it really helps us to stay more disciplined and create a system, an operating system around our business. And that's helped us to kind of grow to the next level. So
that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. What are your best strategies on, you're juggling a lot, dude.
Yeah.
You got a lot on your plate. And I know, I know many people watching and listening feel maybe the same. They may not be running the same size business, but they've got lots on their plate too. So tell me a bit about how do you balance is not the right word, because I don't believe there's a true balance in life, but how do you bring your best to all these different facets of your life? You got your own podcast you're running, you're speaking, you're probably doing coaching and consulting. You got this big, huge company you're running. I mean, tell me a bit about that. You got your personal life. Do you still compete in triathlons too?
Yeah. So I've actually kind of put the brakes on that a bit, and haven't been racing for the last year or so.
Yeah.
But, and so I'm in a good place with that as far as just staying healthy, staying fit, and continuing to run it. But I find that it's best to schedule in my crying in the fetal position time. So that I can...
That's awesome.
I mean, I kind of joke about that, but I mean, I think there's seasons in our lives where, we experience that overwhelm, and we just have to be conscious of it. I'm in one of those periods now where I am, taking on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it really is like the simple tools that I take into that are working on just bringing that overwhelm of everything that I have to achieve, like, all these big goals that we have, and all of these things that I have to do, and narrowing down to what are the quarterly objectives that I want to achieve? What are the simple things that I want to get there? Right. How does that turn into the weekly to-do list that I can get done this week? And what are the 3 simple things that I can do today? And I try to be so disciplined about only 3 things today.
That's really
only
smart.
3 things. Yeah. Because otherwise it's like, I'm going to write down every single to-do list item that I have for today. And I'm going to think I'm really organized, but I'm never going to get to all of them. And I'm always going to be disappointed in myself, and I'm always going to be overwhelmed.
Right.
But 3 significant things that I can do today. Yeah. That leaves me with a win. Even if I can't get to them all, I'm making one step of progress. Yeah. And that also leaves me the capacity to react to the things that I have to react to on a daily basis, which are bound to happen in that organization. Mm-hmm. So that's helpful. And then another tool is something that I've been terrible with throughout my life is delegating, because I've always felt that, that the best leaders dig in, that they are entrenched, that they're, that they're doing the same jobs as everybody else, and making sure that they do that. But what I've discovered and what I'm trying to shift in our philosophy is that that's not the best use of a leader's time. Yes, the leader should lead, from the front and make those courageous decisions, but immersing yourself into the day-to-day of everything that we're doing is not productive, and it's not helpful to the company. And it doesn't serve the people that are doing those jobs. The best thing that we can do is provide support and delegate those things effectively to the people that know what they're doing and do it best, so that we can do what we do best and what we're hired to do.
Yeah, I love it. As you say that, I thought to myself, when's the last time I thought, what are the 3 most important things for me to get done today?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, what would happen if I did that daily? I mean, maybe we'll build a 9-figure company. It's awesome, man. Hey, listen, I want to talk to you about you went to the World Championships in triathlon, from what I understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where did this amazing athletic physical journey come into play in your life? Were you always an athlete? Was this, after recovery? Tell me about this.
Yeah, I was, so I grew up an athlete. I grew up what I would call a professional full-size pizza eater on a daily basis. So no, I'm totally kidding. I actually never grew up as an athlete. I think I was the second string bench warmer for a 0-10 baseball team in high school. That was my experience with athletics growing up.
Heading to the MLB. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So not really a lot of experience there. But as part of my, recovery, one of the things that I constantly heard within sobriety. So when I was 32 years old, going into my 33rd year, in that first year of recovery, I learned a lot about relationships with fear and all that kind of stuff. And I shifted my perspective on it to a significant degree, thanks to those rooms.
Yeah.
And this is part of that experience with embracing fear, because with a year
Yeah.
of sobriety, I'd been told all throughout that first year of recovery, don't make any major life changes your first year in sobriety, because you want sobriety to be that priority, right? But because I'm that A-type, anxious overachiever type, I always looked at that and said, okay, well, once I hit a year, then I need to make a major life change, because that's what they're telling me. So when that year hit, I decided I wanted to make a major life change with my physical health, because I spent a year taking care of my mental and my psychological and my spiritual health. But I neglected my physical health. I was still smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I was still eating like garbage. And yeah, I knew that my physical health was suffering, and I wanted to bring that piece together, because I knew that would kind of round out my life. And so I remembered a time when I was in the midst of my addiction, when I saw the Ironman World Championship on television for the first time. And the first time I saw it, again, I was in the midst of my addiction. I was so inspired by the people that I was seeing, like, just swimming 2.4 miles, biking 112 miles, and running a full marathon at the end. And I was just like, how are they doing that? That's not humanly possible. And then there was this like spark for an instant of, but wouldn't it be so cool if I could do something like that? And I don't know, folks, I mean, if people listening have ever had that experience, but there's that moment where that spark of like, wouldn't that be cool? And then the very next second, a millisecond later, that fear shows up and says, no, you can't do that. Yeah. That's not you. You're not an Ironman. You smoke a pack of cigarettes a day and all this kind of stuff. Why don't you go back to drinking beer and feeling sorry for yourself? And that's what happened to me at that moment. But when I had that year of sobriety, that vision kind of reemerged in my life, because and it reemerged when I had a more empowered mindset, because of this, everything that I learned in sobriety. I instead of having this, you're a piece of junk that isn't amounting to anything, and drinking, and you're just trying to maintain all day. You're this person that has just gotten a year sober. You have this point of reference to doing something you never thought that you could do. And you're looking at the world as like, what's next for me? Well, I'm so excited. Then that thought popped up again, where, there comes the excitement again of like, what if I could do something like that? And then the fear popped up again, because it doesn't go away. And it started telling me the same things it told me before, which were, you can't do that. You're not an athlete. You'll never be an Ironman. Are you kidding me? Look at you. Yeah. But then, like, because I had this experience, I was able to actually get curious about it and say, is that true? Or what if I could do that? Right. And so I just started to research it, and I started to look at the first stupid question I typed into the internet was, how do you sign up for the Ironman World Championship? Which I learned really quickly. You can't just sign up for the Ironman World Championship. Right. You have to qualify, and you have to be one of the best in the world. Right. So that became my dream. Wow. And I had this dream without ever having swam, any distance in the ocean, without ever even riding a road bike before. I had this vision of myself that was so powerful, of me crossing the Ironman World Championship finish line, just like they were on television. Yeah. And I'll tell you, that vision drove me to take that first step, to learn to float in the pool, to take those small 5% incremental steps toward getting to it, so that 4 years later, on national television, on the very show that I was watching, I finished the Ironman World Championship, because I qualified a few years later. Yeah. Wow. Or a few races, a few months earlier. Sorry.
Wow. That's an incredible story. As you said that, a lot of great things in there. I had this thought that came to me, though, is that when you had that vision of, this is what I'm going to do, and it wouldn't go away. I recognize in that moment that's again, that kind of spiritual self, that essence of us, that true nature of who we are. The thought that dawned on me, I've never had this thought before, but I have to share it with you, is that these visions that we get that are unique to us, right? Like for you, it was the Ironman. I don't have any desire for an Ironman, but for you, it was the Ironman. And in a way, it's that higher part of us that's guiding us to the new levels of life. It's almost like a vision that's going to require us to move into this new version of us. It's going to require us to become to shift some habits, to shift some thought patterns, to shift some things that we've been doing and thinking and feeling so that we can step into now. And it gives us a brand new reference point of who we can be. So awesome story, man.
Thank you.
Really,
Yeah.
really awesome story.
Yeah.
I want to keep chatting for hours and hours. I know we've got some time. We do need to wrap up coming here shortly. But I want to, before we wrap up the show here, you host your own show called Flow Over Fear. So we've talked a lot about fear. Tell me about flow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I believe that, in just thinking through my own fear and how I've experienced fear and how I see it show up in my world, I've really asked a lot of questions on, well, if fear is so uncomfortable, what is the opposite of fear? And, I think a lot of people would think about the opposite of fear being fearlessness. That would be a natural thing. But when you think that through and you think about what fearlessness looks like, think of a frat guy standing on the roof of a house about to jump into a pool, and we would assume that person's fearless, but there's nothing more frightening than a person or something that is fearless, because there's so much danger in it, right? So fearlessness doesn't feel like it's the opposite of fear, and that doesn't seem right.
Okay.
So when I think about that, I think that flow becomes the opposite of fear. And the reason is because we don't necessarily, because when the traditional way that we think of fear is something uncomfortable, something we don't want to feel, something we want to push away, something we fight against. But when we let go of that, and then we start to look at fear in the face, and we start to name it, and we start to build a relationship with it, and then we finally embrace it. What happens when we start to embrace fear and we ask the questions of it is we flow. We start to flow better. It's exactly like a river. When you look at a river that's obstructed with boulders and fallen trees and things like that, it's rough. It's going in all different directions. The flow is compromised. But when you remove all of those obstacles, it's flowing. And that's the way I look at fear versus flow. Flow is not the absence of fear. It's just removing the obstacles that prevent us from being our best and allowing us to experience life to a more elevated degree.
It's beautiful, man. So Thanks. Good. We may have to do this another time, an entire extra episode just on that.
I'd love to.
How do we get in more of that state? How do we use strategies and tools to achieve more of that? Because I think we all want more of that, living from there. Man, I have loved today.
Thank you, man.
Our time together. It's been really fun. I was looking forward to it after we got to hang out the other day. And I knew it'd be good, but I didn't know it was going to be this good. This has been,
thanks, man.
I'm not exaggerating when I say it. It's been I think we're coming up on our 100th episode right away here, and it's been one of my all-time favorite episodes I've ever done.
I appreciate that, Ben. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to me too. I love talking about this stuff. I love what you're doing and helping people improve their mindsets, and you're doing such amazing work in the world. I'm thrilled that we're able to connect and help each other together.
100%, man. 100%. On the note of connecting, for people to connect more with you, where do you want them to find you? What's the best places? Tell me about that.
Yeah, the best place is my website, which is adamcliffordhill.com. So Clifford's my middle name. I know that's a fear that I got over, was owning my middle name, which is, terrible. But so adamcliffordhill.com, and there you'll find information about the show Flow Over Fear, my speaking, where I actually, have keynotes where I help people to turn that fear into flow, and I use those actionable strategies. So if you want to find me there, Instagram is the Adam C. Hill, and I look forward to connecting.
Amazing, man. Amazing. Hey, today was so good. I'm excited to get this out to everybody. And listen, as you're watching, as you're listening, I know I say this on every episode, but I really mean it today too, in a way that I know that either you were deeply impacted by this, or there's somebody that's going to be deeply impacted by this. So make sure this episode does not go unshared. Send it to that person you're thinking of. They probably popped in your mind. You're thinking, man, so-and-so, they would love this. Share the episode with them. tag Adam if you're sharing on social, tag myself. Love having you here and looking forward to seeing you next time. Adam, thank you so much for the time. And I'm looking
Thank you,
forward
Ben.
to our chats in the future.
Definitely, Ben. Thank you so much.